Now that we are done with all the theories of inspiration, I think we need now to move into the details of our course, Introduction to Old Testament Theology. The whole purpose of this course is to try and understand the importance of Old Testament theology, especially in pastoral care, because as Christians, believers, all of us, we are called to be pastors in different capacities. I also believe in the priesthood of all believers. So each and every Christian, he has a mandate to spread the gospel, has a mandate to shepherd the flock, he has a mandate to teach others, has a mandate to help others in seeing God. So the purpose of this course basically is just to equip all Christians or believers to understand the importance of Old Testament studies or understanding the Old Testament and how to use it properly in pastoral care or pastoral theology. So this course empowers us to use the Old Testament pastorally in global context, that is, how to preach, teach, and shepherd fully today. And I think I've mentioned this before. I've been teaching Old Testament for some time, and my approach to biblical studies has been very radical. But now I've twisted, and I think I've toned it down a little bit, trying to be more doctrinal in my approach, trying to see how, as believers, we can benefit from the Bible or the Scripture to transform the world that we live in. So hopefully we're going to journey throughout this Old Testament studies together and properly, and we enjoy the studies. So yeah, I also come from a background whereby in my country colonization took place, and somehow missionaries played a major role through the colonization process. And from this context now, I strongly believe or hold the belief that the Bible has been used and abused by those in power to dehumanize the less privileged ones. And this makes me more of a liberation theologian. And for that reason, any theology which is not liberatory in nature for me should not be entertained as Christian theology. Any theology that is not liberatory in nature should never be entertained as Christian theology, as emanating from the Jesus movement. Due to this, I strongly believe in post-colonial biblical hermeneutics. However, in this course, I'm not going to be extremely radical. My goal is to make biblical exegesis as liberatory as possible for the benefit of all the global Christians. However, I am open to deeper engagement with anyone who finds this presentation provocative and meaningful. So let's move on. Why the Old Testament matters in pastoral care. Why the Old Testament matters in pastoral care. Pastoral care often focuses on comforting, guiding, and forming God's people in times of crisis, joy, confusion, and growth. While the New Testament is frequently used for this, the Old Testament provides an indispensable foundation for pastoral ministry. It contains the earliest and most profound revelations of who God is, how He relates to His people, and how His people navigate real-life struggles. Below is an extended explanation of 5 key reasons why Old Testament deeply matters for pastoral care. So now I'm going to mention 5 main reasons why the Old Testament matters for pastoral care. Number 1, the Old Testament reveals the character of God. It reveals God as the creator, sustainer. God is the creator. Those are the creation narratives. Sustainer, how God sustained people during the period of suffering. Covenant keeper. It's the relationship that exists or that should exist between human beings and God. Pastoral care begins with knowing who God is. That's the foundation of pastoral care, knowing who God is. And this can only be found in the Old Testament, who God is. The Old Testament gives us earliest and most foundational portraits of God. In Genesis, God is the creator, purposeful, powerful, and relational. In Exodus, He is the liberator, who hears the cries of His people. In Psalms, He is the shepherd, refuge, fortress, and deliverer. In Prophets, He is holy, righteous, patient, and compassionate. These are not only abstract descriptions. They shape pastoral care because people need to know the kind of God they are entrusting their suffering and hope to. God's character is revealed through His actions. The Old Testament is full of narratives where God acts. He protects Joseph in hardships. He meets Hagar in despair. He renews covenant with a rebellious Israel. He forgives David's worst sins but holds him accountable. In pastoral care, people often ask, what is God like? Can I trust Him? The Old Testament answers with lived history. God is faithful, patient, and deeply involved in human life. God's covenant love shapes pastoral assurance. Words like steadfast love and faithfulness are Old Testament foundations for the gospel of comfort. They show that God's relationship with His people is not unstable. He binds Himself to them. For pastoral ministry, this means we reassure people that God does not abandon them. We anchor our hope not in our feelings but in God's proven character. Number 2, the Old Testament provides foundational identity stories. Pastoral care gets its story from the scripture. People make sense of life through stories. The Old Testament provides the story of creation, dignity and purpose, the story of fall, brokenness, the story of covenant, belonging, the story of Israel, community, the story of redemption, hope. These are not just historical, they are pastoral tools. Identity through the patriarchs, Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Jacob, each represents identity formation. God chooses unlikely people. God blesses them with purpose. God shapes them through struggle. Pastors help people to see you are also part of God's ongoing story. Israel's story mirrors our spiritual journey. Israel wrestles, wanders, doubts, repents, and returns. Pastoral care uses these stories to show struggle is normal. Faith involves wrestling. God works through imperfect people. Redemption unfolds over time. The Old Testament rules Christian identity. Without the Old Testament story, the New Testament makes little sense. Pastoral identity. God brings pastoral identity, being God's people, called, formed, and sent, is grounded first in the Old Testament. Number 3, the Old Testament addresses suffering, injustice, fear, and hope. The Old Testament is honest about suffering. Pastoral care requires honesty. The Old Testament does not sanitize pain. Job wrestles with undeserved suffering. Israel cries out under oppression. The psalm gives raw emotional honesty. Lamentations captures communal trauma. Pastoral care can assure people, you are not the first to feel this way. Scripture understands you. Injustice and oppression are central themes. Books like Exodus, Amos, Micah speak directly to injustice. God hears the oppressed. God judges exploitative powers. God calls people to justice. This equips pastoral ministry to speak to abuse, social injustice, marginalization, systemic sin. Fear and anxiety addressed in the Old Testament. Consider the fear, fear not, for I am with you. Isaiah. The Lord is my light and salvation. Whom shall I fear? Psalms. These are powerful pastoral words in terms of fear. Hope rooted in God's promises. Old Testament is not vague opticism. It is covenant. It is grounded in God's faithfulness. Throughout generations, it anticipates ultimate restoration. Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. This allows pastoral care to offer hope that is historically rooted and theologically grounded. Number 4, the Old Testament offers models of prayer and lament. The Psalms is a prayer book for God's people. The Psalms are central to pastoral care. They articulate anger, fear, praise, confusion, and trust. They show that God welcomes raw honesty. They provide language when people cannot find words. Pastors use Psalms to teach. It's okay to question. It's okay to cry. It's okay to lament. God receives your brokenness. Lament is a biblical pastoral practice. Many Christians are uncomfortable with lament, but Old Testament normalizes it. The Old Testament teaches lament is not lack of faith. Lament is not an act of faith in crisis. Lament is an act of faith in crisis. Lament holds God to his promises. Pastoral care informed by lament helps people express grief instead of suppressing it, bring suffering to God rather than withdrawing from him. Intercessory prayer model leaders, figures like Moses, Samuel, Nehemiah, Daniel, all intercede for their people. Their prayers demonstrate advocacy, confession, dependence on God, boldness before God. These models deeply enrich pastoral life and pastoral counseling. Number 5, the Old Testament speaks prophetically to the society. Prophets address societal brokenness. Prophets such as Isaiah, Jeremiah, Amos, Micah confronted idolatry, corruption, oppression of the poor, unjust systems, religious hypocrisy. Pastoral care is not only personal, it is communal and societal. The Old Testament gives pastors tools to address unjust practices in workplaces, abuse of power, racism, economic exploitation, and cultural idolatry. Prophetic tradition sharpens Christian ethics. The Old Testament forms pastoral conscience that hates injustice, loves mess, walks humbly with God, advocates for vulnerable. Pastors working in counseling, preaching, or community leadership draw heavily from this prophetic tradition. The Old Testament links pastoral personal faith with public responsibility. Pastoral care must help believers to connect personal holiness, social righteousness, community responsibility. The prophets continually insist that faith is not private. This empowers pastors to speak about social healing, reconciliation, economic fairness, stewardship, and and the holiness of life. What are we saying, our friends, here? In conclusion, we are saying the Old Testament is not merely background, it is the spiritual foundation of Christian pastoral ministry. It matters because it reveals who God is. It gives foundational stories. It speaks to human experiences. It provides models of prayer and lament. It speaks prophetically to the society, calling pastors to confront sin and pursue justice. Not only pastors, but all Christians. Without the Old Testament, pastoral care becomes shallow, disconnected from God's full revelation. With it, pastoral ministry becomes richer, more grounded, more faithful to the God, more faithful to God, who has been working with His people from the beginning. So, in our next topic, we want to focus. In this topic, we only unpacked the importance of Old Testament in pastoral care or in the lives of Christians today. But in the next lesson, we also want to focus on the challenges that we face pastorally when we will use the Old Testament. So the topic will be challenges in using the Old Testament pastorally. That's our next topic. See you then.